when we can accept our body the way that it is, it becomes really easy to accept somebody else's body for the way that it is. Because realistically, their body has no impact on your life. Like, can we all just sit and admit that for like 2 seconds? Someone else's body, a stranger on the street, their body has no impact on your life.
Living a healthy, balanced life is no small feat, especially when you're a mom. With meals to cook, laundry to load, work to do, and humans to raise, it can be easy to feel like we're in an on-again, off-again relationship with healthy living. But it doesn't have to feel this way. I believe living a healthy life has become way too complicated. What we need isn't a new plan or program telling us what to eat or how to live. We need simple, uncomplicated routines and information that's going to help us live our best, most beautiful life without rules and restrictions. Join me, Kristin Dovbniak, holistic health coach, certified intuitive eating counselor, and mama of 2, for weekly conversations on what it means to live a healthy, balanced life, uncomplicate eating, and simplify in every area of mom life. Hey friends, welcome back to the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. Kristin here. And every so often, there is a guest that I have on that I need to spend some time as we are talking, processing through and working through the powerful things that they share. And this episode is one of those episodes, friends. I am so honored to have Christina Johnson on. You might know her on Instagram as @encouraging_dietitian, to share with us some really, really important topics about health at every size, thin privilege, racial bias in the healthcare industry and in eating disorders. And, you know, as a woman who grew up white in the Northeast, I think like many of us, my eyes have been opened a lot in the last couple of months to the injustices that are going on around the world, but even closer to home, you know, in ways that I know that I didn't realize just by the nature of the way I grew up. And, you know, my parents did a good job of raising us, teaching us to love other people and to not judge other people by the way that they looked. But I think I also was the person who thought that, you know, if I wasn't judging other people, then I wasn't contributing to the problem. But the truth is that I also wasn't doing anything to help the problem or to support people who look differently than me. And I grew up with white privilege. I grew up with thin privilege. And I've never been told that I need to lose weight in order to be healthy, or that I never felt like things weren't available to me or people didn't understand me because of the way that I looked. And because of this, it means that that has been my worldview. And I really wanted to learn. And I really want to share it with all of you who have also been in similar positions, who might not understand what things like health at every size means. For women who might not understand what it means to be an ally when it comes to supporting women who look differently than us, and men as well. But I work primarily with women and I speak primarily with women. Literally 98% of this podcast are women. So that's just who I speak to throughout this episode. So Christina shared some really, really important information as well as resources with me on this episode. And she was so gracious with me in kind of processing through what she was sharing with me and rambling a little bit about my own experiences and really just trying to come to terms with a lot of the things that I didn't know, and kind of admitting to that and also being willing to learn, because I'm here. One of the reasons I have this podcast is because I want to invite diverse voices on to share their own both lived experience and expert experience, to open up our eyes and our ears to learning more about the world around us, to learning more about ourselves and how we can help other people. And Christina talks a lot about how when we're not obsessed about our bodies and we're not obsessed about food, how we are able to have the mental bandwidth to serve people in our lives, and how this doesn't need to be some huge overhaul that we're making. It's about starting exactly where we are, starting with our families as moms and moving outward from there in making changes, that it's okay to start small. But it's also okay that even if we feel like we're afraid that we're going to say the wrong thing or act the wrong way, it's more important that we just say the thing and that we just start acting and we just start taking the first step. So I appreciate her so much for being on and sharing this with us, sharing her own experience, sharing her expertise, and being gracious with me in my own processing along the way. So I think that you will find this episode incredible and eye-opening. So for those of you who don't already know Christina Johnson is a registered dietitian who specializes in eating disorders, disordered eating, and intuitive eating. She provides education on the intersections of food justice, food security, food apartheid, and racial equity. You can find her on Instagram at Encouraging Dietitian and on Twitter at Encouraging RD, and her website is encouragingdietitian.com, and she has a podcast, Intuitive Eating for the Culture, which I've listened to several episodes of, and it's a great follow-up to the conversation that we had today. So I'm so excited for you to hear our conversation. I hope that you will learn from it and also share it with a friend who could learn from it as well. Hi, Christina. I am so excited to have you on the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. We have some pretty incredible topics to cover today, but I love to start with a quick little icebreaker if you're up for it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Let's do it.
So my icebreaker question is, what do you drink first thing in the morning when you wake up?
Does mouthwash count? No. I think the first thing I probably have been drinking recently is definitely coffee.
I'm a coffee girl too. I try to have a glass of water first, but I love a good mug of coffee. So I would love to just start with your story. So how did you get into the world of nutrition, especially as an intuitive eating counselor and a HAES practitioner?
Yeah, so it kind of started, one, with my own weird relationship with food and like wanting to learn more about food, but then also because a lot of my family has chronic illness. And so I thought like I wanted to go in nutrition and be like a voice for them in the field, because I felt like they weren't very well represented and their dietitians oftentimes weren't very respectful of the culture. And so it's like, oh, if I go in, then I can sort of change the way that dynamic works out. And I don't do anything related to the chronic illnesses that my family lives with. But I think as I went through the schooling process, I got to grad school and kind of had this crisis where I was like, oh no, if I need to become a dietitian that has to prescribe diets, I'd rather not be a dietitian at all. Like I was like, well, I'm going to finish the degree because that's how I roll. But I was trying to figure out like, what do I do? What am I going to be able to do? And so while I got into my internship, I found like I created my Instagram and found the like HAES community. And that's where I was like, oh, okay, now I can be a dietitian. Like I know exactly what I'm going to do. It's morphed quite a bit since then, but I think that's really how I got into it. And it's just been this wild ride of just learning and growing and challenging myself to keep learning and growing, and just really being able to create a community where we all get to learn and grow, I think in a really safe space where it's not, no one's sort of patronizing anyone for anything.
Yeah, I love that so much. And when I was going to dietitian school way back in the day, I didn't, like I shared before, I didn't end up going into the internship or any of that, but I certainly heard nothing about intuitive eating or health at every size. That wasn't even mentioned when I was in school. And it's so incredible. I bet if it was, that would have resonated with me a lot more because, I had struggled with an eating disorder in late high school and early college, kind of my first year or so of school. And I was in a similar place as you, going like, if I'm just going to be prescribing people diets, I remember them teaching us how to count our own calories and our macros and all those things and going through it and going like, I did this for years. I don't want to teach people how to do this. It made me crazy. So it's so incredible that there is this space now where, we can support women in other ways. And, dietitians can support women in a much broader way, and in a much more, I think, respectful way, to women of different body sizes and every kind of woman, right? And men too, right? I don't know why I speak to women primarily, hence the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. So I refer to women a lot, but help everyone, right? So we've already talked a lot about intuitive eating here on the podcast, and that's, kind of the center of what I do and what I share. And I've certainly made references to HAES, to health at every size, but we haven't really had a guest come on and actually explain what the health at every size movement is and what it means to be a HAES practitioner. And I think that, just hearing from my own clients, I think there's a lot of confusion around what it means. And I've heard a lot on social media lately from other practitioners who have it confused as well. So I'm wondering if you can just kind of give a general overview of what HAES is, what the movement is, and what it really means.
Yeah, so HAES stands for Health at Every Size. And that's, I think, a lot of times where people first get lost because they think healthy at every size. And so adding that Y changes the whole dynamic of what's going on there. And so it's health at every size. And it's like a treatment paradigm, if you will, that's more inclusive, that allows people to, one, define health for themselves, and then to seek out health should they choose to, however they choose to do that, in a way that is respectful and compassionate towards the person. And so there are 5 points, like 5 principles of HAES, which are weight inclusive, respectful care, joyful movement, health enhancement, and then eating for well-being. And so under those 5 principles are ways that you can, again, based on your own definition of health, because that's going to be different for someone else. Like if you are living with diabetes, how you define feeling health and like seeking health is going to be different than someone who does not live with diabetes. And so it's allowing them to define that for themselves. And then under those 5 principles, determine like, how do I want to be compassionate towards myself and my health journey?
I like that you mentioned that a lot, and you brought that, chronic health condition in there too, because I think it is really important in this intuitive eating and HAES space to, encourage women and everyone. I keep saying women, but that's who I'm mostly speaking to, right? That it's okay if it looks different for us than it looks for someone else. And I think there is that, confusion oftentimes when we see someone who is an intuitive eating practitioner themselves, or, who is talking about HAES and thinking that we just need to do what they do. But it really is, like you said, it's about defining health for themselves, what that means based on their own body, based on their own, their own needs. So I love that so much. So I want to dig a little bit more into this health at every size side of things, right? Because I think, like you said, this is where a lot of the confusion comes in with people thinking it means healthy at every size. And so I think a lot of what I hear surrounding this is, well, if I gained this amount of pounds or this amount of weight, then I wouldn't be healthy. So can we talk a little bit first? I want to dig into weight stigma a little bit and kind of where the root of this idea comes from, that healthier equals smaller or weight gain equals bad. And maybe just start talking about how we can break free from this mentality that we need to lose weight in order to be healthy.
Yeah, so what a loaded question, but a very important question. So weight stigma on the surface is which you talked about, is the concept that, it's the concept that being thinner is healthier, right? Achieving a particular body type is healthier. By any means necessary is where we've made it to at this point in society, right? By any means necessary, you have to stay in that particular body size in order to be deemed, quote, healthy. Doesn't matter what's going on internally as long as you look good on the outside. And that on the surface seems like it is just sort of individual blame towards like the person. But if we really dig into how we created that concept of health anyway, it's a very Western concept of health. Because if you look at other cultures around the world, they don't look at health the same way that we look at health here in America. And so once you really start to dig into it, you realize, and there's a book on this subject that's called Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia. And that talks a lot about how the introduction of another body type, another culture catapulted Europe into the idea of, okay, well, in order to distinguish ourselves from this other group of people that we think are lesser than us, we have to change the way that we look. And so it kind of grew from there, and it became the fabric with which we built the society.
Oh my gosh. So I will admit that I still need to read that book. I have it on my reading list for books that I would like to read. And, I have so many books on my reading list that, I've read Health at Every Size. And so I have a little bit of knowledge on this topic, but it blows my mind that, just the fact that in North America, at least, that we were introduced a different body size and a different body type. And all of a sudden we were like, well, that's wrong. And we all need to kind of look this certain way. And it's interesting, just even thinking of kind of my own family and what I was taught growing up and the ideals that were sort of spoken over me as a child in different ways. So my grandparents, my background, my grandfather's mom immigrated from Syria. So she's Middle Eastern, and the rest of my family, they're all very European, right? And my mom and, her sister and kind of her side of the family, their body shape is just a little bit different than their mom and kind of her side of the family. And I remember that sort of being something that was like, oh, we've got those, those Syrian thighs, or we've got that Syrian nose, or we look this certain way. And that was somehow bad. And I remember, myself coming along and my body's shape being maybe a little bit more like my dad's, who's all European, and just a little bit more. And the comments that were made on me as a child, like, oh, well, you're so lucky that you look a different way, or that your body is a different way. And that definitely played into me feeling like, well, then that's the goal, right? I need to maintain. I was a child, right? I'm a little kid. I hadn't even gone through puberty. It was like, our bodies are meant to change over time, but just that little bit of that, oh, well, this is the good thing. This is the good way. And it's so interesting that kind of just when you mention that, and obviously I am not a Black woman, so I've not experienced that. But just that little influence in my own life, which was very small and not, anywhere near what many women and men go through when they're experiencing this sort of stigma. But it blows my mind because I never knew that, and that I never learned that in school. And kind of going back to that too, and going back to the fact that we have this I say terrible, but this ideal that everyone needs to look a certain way. And then therefore that is what healthy means. And so, another thing that I would love to kind of talk about a little bit, is this idea of thin privilege. Because I think that we hear a lot, I think that we hear a lot, I think because I'm also in this space as well. And I support the Health at Every Size movement. And this is still something that I only learned about in the last few years. So how does this idea of thin privilege play into maybe that we, or many of us, myself included, have never experienced going to a doctor's office and, having a doctor say to me, oh, well, you need to lose weight in order to be healthy. And I even have a health condition a chronic health condition that, many women who do have this chronic health condition are in bigger bodies. And oftentimes they are automatically taught that they need to lose weight. But I wasn't, because they're like, well, you're fine. You don't need to lose weight. So they literally had no other answer for me and what I could do to support my health, because that is the answer for most women. So can we talk about this a little bit? Sorry, I talked for a while there, but I want to kind of talk about how that plays into it.
One, that makes me so sad that your healthcare provider couldn't provide you care because the only tool they had for your illness is weight loss.
Yeah.
Shout out to all the doctors in the world, but also that's really lazy medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's lazy, that your only solution, and I'm using air quotes around solution, for someone's health condition is weight loss, when we actually know that doesn't actually solve their health condition. Like, it's an incurable health condition. So that makes me really sad. So sad. I'm so sorry. And if for anyone that's listening, if you've also been in that situation where the only solution that they have for your health condition is weight loss, I'm so sorry. Like, there's so many other ways that we could tackle your health conditions that don't involve you changing your body in a way that your body doesn't want to change.
Yes.
There's so many other things that we could do. As far as thin privilege goes, I like to explain the concept of privilege because people think it's this thing that you choose, and it is not, right? So I did not choose the privileges that I have in this lifetime, right? I have thin privilege because I am in a smaller body. I can fit in a plane seat. Nobody's yelling at me, telling me to lose weight. Although some people think I'm not a good dietitian, air quotes around that, because I don't fit that sort of thinner ideal, if you will. But it is the stuff that you don't think about that is an identifier for you, right? So I don't think about, well, I mean, I guess I sort of think about, but I don't really think about my education being a privilege, right? Because it's what I did. I don't think about the fact that I am able-bodied as my privilege because it's just what I am. I'm not checking the box when I go somewhere. Are you able-bodied? There's no box for that, right? So if we're thinking about privilege as the thing that we don't think about, that allows us to move through the world easier, then our thin privilege is the thing that we're not thinking about because our body is not the reason that our body doesn't get in the way of us moving through the world. Case in point, going to the doctor and receiving health care that is actually health care, or flying on a plane, right? Getting on a plane seat, using public transportation, finding clothes at the store, now more than ever, but all of the ways that we have allowed our systems, our structures, to essentially like push out people that are in the fringes, right? Push out people that have multiple marginalizations. And so if we are looking at thin privilege in our own lives, it's more us saying like, how has the small body that I'm living in has been afforded to move through this world without anyone challenging my health? Because no one's looking at me questioning whether I'm healthy or not.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So with someone, especially someone who, it's interesting. I'm trying to think of kind of how to word this question, because I think it is different for women in bigger bodies who have been told their whole life that in order to be healthy, they need to lose weight. Then hearing something like health at every size, it can go either way. It can either be that, disbelief. It can be like, there's no way. I mean, I've been told my whole life that in order to be healthy, I need to lose weight. And maybe they have. Maybe they've struggled with on again, off again dieting and trying to lose weight and having an unhealthy relationship with food. Or maybe they've just, gone like, well, I'll just never be healthy because I'm going to be in a bigger body. And maybe I shouldn't bother, or, that's just the way it is. But then there's the other side of things, where I think women in smaller bodies, it might be easy to accept that, oh yeah, sure, you could be healthy at every size, but not really truly believe it because you've never had that experience, right? Of being in a bigger body. I've been in a slightly bigger body than I am now, but for all intents and purposes, I've been in the same size body since I was a teenager, right? And so I've never experienced that. I've always had thin privilege. I've never experienced not being able to fit into a plane seat or not being able to fit into clothes at the store or anything like that. So how can accepting our own bodies, no matter what body size we are, and accepting health at every size and embracing health at every size really help us to fight for a world that does embrace diversity in body size? Because we don't see that.
Yeah, I call that our mental real estate. That frees us up. If I'm not so overly concerned, obsessively concerned with my health, in a way that distracts me from my own life, then I have all the mental space in the world to care about what other people are struggling with. I look back at my own relationship with food that for a long time, I could barely think about my own life, let alone what somebody else had going on, because I was so concerned about what was on my plate that I couldn't look up and look around and see what was going on outside of my own little world. And so when we can accept our body the way that it is, it becomes really easy to accept somebody else's body for the way that it is. Because realistically, their body has no impact on your life. Like, can we all just sit and admit that for like 2 seconds? Someone else's body, a stranger on the street, their body has no impact on your life. You don't know them.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so true. And I know when I talk to women about, the way that they speak to themselves, especially when they beat themselves up about not fitting into this certain ideal or not losing weight or not being able to stick to the diet or the plan or whatever it is, I asked them if they would say those things to a friend, or if a friend told them that they were failing in that way, would we think any lesser of them?
And they're like, well, no, of course not. And I'm like, so why are you treating yourself that way? Right. So but I think that, I'm 100% with you. I think about those days, those days, really, those months and years that I was obsessed, so self-focused, and I wasn't thinking about the world around me. If I'm truly being honest, I wasn't thinking about the, incredible injustices that are going on all over the world in so many different ways, because I was like, well, I just got to get healthy, so to speak, which wasn't healthy at all. And ultimately for me ended up in me being really, really sick. And that wasn't helping me help anyone else in the world either. I mean, starting with my own family and then moving outwards. So I love that idea of mental real estate and how important that is. So I want to talk a little bit about, I know you've shared a little bit about your own relationship with food that has kind of transformed over the years. So how can embracing this idea of health at every size transform our relationship with food and accept eating intuitively? Like, I love that you call it our birthright, right? Because it is our birthright that we were born intuitive eaters, no matter what size we are. So how can this kind of transform our relationship with food?
Yeah. So once we truly internalize that belief, because there's a difference between head knowledge of health at every size and heart knowledge of health at every size. Because I can logically say, yes, health at every size. We can all seek health at any body size. But then I can, in my own self, be like, but that doesn't apply to me, right? I haven't internalized that. That's not heart knowledge at that point. So once it's heart knowledge and I have access to that too, then it frees us up to really just explore food and have it be this more adventurous thing. And we're not like in the back of our minds saying, I have unconditional permission until, right? I have unconditional permission to eat whatever unless I reach that particular body size, and then all bets are off. Or I'm allowed to eat whatever I want when I want, unless my body, and unless I have a chronic illness, and then all bets are off. Now I have to completely change what I'm doing and go back to a diet. Because there's a big difference between a diet and medical nutrition therapy. Huge difference. So to me, from what I've seen and what I've read, it just creates this space where you're truly like, it takes the pressure off of food is how I like to think of it. It's just like, okay, food is food now. Food is neutral and I'm allowed to explore it, eat it, choose what I do and don't like, and that's fine. And it's not this thing that's moral anymore, right? Food has no morality at that point because my body doesn't have morality. It's just a thing. It's a neutral thing. And I'm allowed to nourish it how I want and then care about other stuff, right? I can get back to my hobbies. I can get back to my family. I can get back to caring about social justice or finding out about it for the first time. Because sometimes that happens for people is they find out about it for the first time as they're learning about the ways that diet culture impacts people.
I have a question that I didn't ask you ahead of time, but I'm curious your answer. So how do we start moving then from that head knowledge, from the woman who's hearing this and going, okay, that makes sense. It makes sense that we can embrace health at every size. How do they start moving from that head knowledge to that heart knowledge?
A lot of times with my client, I do it with the more external things first before I sort of move internally. So that's giving yourself a lot of permission. So giving yourself permission to buy bigger clothes, giving yourself permission to buy more comfortable clothes. I oftentimes talk about comfortable clothes for that tactile feeling. So if my clothing, let's say it's stretchy, but it's an uncomfortable fabric, that's still not comfortable, right? So like stretchy clothing, that's comfortable fabric that you're not like constantly readjusting it all day long. You're not constantly like moving it around because you're like, oh, this is itchy. Like once you stop thinking about the clothes on your body, it becomes really easy to like think about your body in a more neutral sense because your clothes are doing their job to fit you.
I love that so much. It's so funny is over the last couple of weeks, I started noticing that when I work out, I wear sports bras. But something that was bugging me and has literally bugged me for years is that little padding that goes into sports bras. And it's just so uncomfortable. And anytime I do any sort of movement, I'm like, oh, it's just, I wish it wasn't there. And wasn't the other day, it was a couple weeks ago. I was like, I can just pull these out. And so I took them out.
I saw a post recently that was like, if you're going to make a sports bra, either you sew that cup in there or you don't put it in at all. Stop making it removable. Because I have like the one I'm literally currently wearing right now has the cup sewn in, and I don't even think about it because they're sewn in, right? They're not moving. They're just part of the sports bra, and I can do what I need to do. The second I have the option to like take them out, they start like shifting as I'm moving. That's not comfortable anymore because I'm like, okay, like trying to readjust as I go throughout the day.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it so much less enjoyable to like just constantly, and you do it, you have that. And I noticed that I'm way more aware of my body in that way. So I just started taking them out as just, and it's so much fun every time I find one and I'm like, nope, taking them out because it's just so much more comfortable. And it really does just make for a way more pleasant experience. And I am all about joyful movement. So if I'm going to move, I want to love it. I mean, not every second maybe, but most of it, right? So I want it to be something that I love. So I don't want that uncomfortable feeling. And the same goes for the rest of our lives and going. And so I really, really love that because I know for myself, for so many years, I tried to squeeze into sizes that were too small for me because I was so focused on the actual number. And a coach I had back in the day when I was going through my own intuitive eating journey told me to just cut out all of the sizes on my clothes so I wouldn't even think about it. And eventually I forgot what the sizes were because, different brands, different sizes, because that was something that was a kind of a hang up for me. But the actual physical act of I am only going to choose clothes that are comfortable for me. I can see how that is just so powerful in not having that kind of constant focus on your body.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that so much. So I would love to dig a little bit deeper into kind of a harder topic if you're up for it. And I think you are. So I think like many of us, these past couple of months, my eyes have certainly been opened to the injustice and misrepresentation of people of color in our country. And I think, to be honest, I live in the Northeast. I grew up in the Northeast, and I grew up in an area that's not very diverse at all. And my husband he's Asian Canadian, and his mom's family are from Japan, and he grew up in not rural, it's not rural, but kind of suburban Ontario. And he felt the same way, where he was even though we grew up he was kind of more Midwestern in very different places. Neither of us really had that, I guess, the experience of that happening around us, as much. And to be honest and just to really be upfront, from my own position, it's definitely not been something that I have personally been as aware of as I wish I had been. And I know some of that is on myself and really just not seeking out that knowledge and really seeking out that justice for other people. And it makes me really, really sad that I haven't, right? And I'm sure you've heard this a lot, right? Over the last couple of months and I don't think that, from my perspective, I don't think it's a bad thing. Well, it's definitely not a bad thing that our eyes have been open, but now it's time to bring more awareness and to really take action. And something that I really, truly don't think, and even looking back to my own time in nutrition school, that I realized is how underrepresented people of color in the intuitive eating and HAES space are. As we talked about, the root of a lot of, this bias that we have around being thin and the different body size comes from this racial bias. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit on this for women who are listening, who are really just, their eyes are just being open to this as well. And they really, aren't aware of this, I think. How are we missing our Black sisters and brothers in the way that we share about and practice intuitive eating and health at every size, as well as in the healthcare system?
What a question. I think that access, I think, is a really big point. So if we've created a bunch of systems, right? So here in North America, we've created quite a few systems that keep people out. They're gatekeeping systems, and they don't even need to be, there doesn't have to be a specific person they're gatekeeping anymore. They do their own, they're a feed forward mechanism, right? They're self-propelling. They gatekeep on their own. And so when I think about, going to school for nutrition, right? One, you have to go to college. Therein lies gatekeeping. Being able to afford to go to college, that's gatekeeping. Nutrition is not a program that's offered, at every single college. So you have to, depending on where you're located, you have to travel for your university. That's gatekeeping. I don't know, I don't actually know the statistic on this, but most programs to become a dietitian, the internship, which is, a minimum of 8 months to a year of free labor, in which you pay them to work for free. Oddest concept I've ever heard of. That is not attached to the degree, right? So at least for nursing school, if you go get your bachelor's in nursing, you're going to walk out of there ready to take your NCLEX and become a nurse. When I walk out of my bachelor's of like science and nutrition, I'm not ready to take my exam. I still need to go do an internship and then I can take my exam. Having to work for a minimum of 8 months to a year for free, that's gatekeeping. And so you look at all the ways in which we gatekeep just in that one particular system. So then when we look at, trying to become a certified intuitive eating counselor, that costs money. Trying to become, learn about health at every size, like, how can I get there if I couldn't even get into the program because of the gatekeeping that goes on? And if I'm trying to, as a layperson, right, as someone who's not a health professional, I'm going to take my health professional hat off for 2 seconds. If I'm just a regular person seeking services and I don't even see myself represented, why in the world would I seek out that service, right? Because that tells me it's not for me. If I look at who is a certified intuitive eating counselor, if I look at all the lovely ladies on the internet who are shouting about health at every size from the mountaintops, I don't see myself. And because I don't see myself, clearly it must not be for me. And so if we are sharing about this on the internet and we only share our body and not other people's bodies, whether it with permission, I'm going to add that part, sharing other people's bodies with permission, we are missing out on a wealth of information. There's research, which I recently reread again, where white women or white people in general have statistically the least diverse friend group of all the people on the face of this earth. Where I think it's somewhere in the 90th percentile of their friends look just like them and come from the same socioeconomic status. And that's a really homogenous group of people. That is a really like-minded vacuum, if you will. There's not going to be that much challenging of our ideas if we all look alike. There's nobody to challenge my own concept of beauty if we can share the same foundation shade. Like, it's just not going to be a thing. Versus people of color who, by virtue of having to navigate white spaces, are automatically going to have more diverse friend groups, whether it's them having friends from their own ethnic group or friends outside of their ethnic group, just based on proximity, based on working environments or whatever. We are, in a sense, forced to go kind of outside of our own comfort zone, but it ends up working out for the best anyway. And so if I'm trying to do my part as a person on the internet, I'm going to do my own research. I'm not going to expect somebody to teach me about their lived experience. I'm going to buy a book. I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to read their blog posts. I'm going to read what they're sharing on the internet. And then I'm going to ask for permission to share it, to share it with my friends and be like, hey, like, I'm learning X, Y, or Z things from this person. And this is something, and like, admit that you're uncomfortable about it and say something. Because I think a lot of the conversations that I've had with people recently is being afraid to say something because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. And I've said time and time again, I'd rather you say something and be teachable, be correctable, than to say nothing. Because when you say nothing, that tells me that you don't care and you probably side with the oppressor anyway.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, Shu. I'm so glad that you encouraged women to say something, because I know that I've been in the place where I'm like, well, I've had Black friends and I'm not a racist. So that's fine, right? As long as I'm not a racist, I'm not contributing to the problem. But when we don't stand up for it, when we don't say something, when we don't actually take action, then we're not doing anything and we're not creating any change. And just because we're not, we are not acting on, on being a racist or having that racial bias or anything like that doesn't mean that we are truly taking action. I'm over here. You can see me taking notes about things that I want to share kind of later on, and I want to share with some of my friends, because I mean, I really love this idea of challenging our idea of beauty. And even I have 2 daughters, right? And I really want to encourage my daughters that, there are so many different there's so many, not just there are so many different people in the world that look so many different ways, and that there are so many, and that we are all created beautiful. I believe in God, and I believe that he all created us, equal, but, different, right? And for a reason, right? We are all beautiful in our own way because we are his creation. And I want my girls to know that and to embody that. But if they aren't seeing that, if they're not seeing me act that out, if they're not seeing other people act that out, whether it's in our local friend group, in our local community, or it's, on the internet, because it is unfortunately 2020, but it is 2020. And they're going to be on the internet, right? They already watch YouTube Kids, and my my older daughter, is already, she'll be 7. By the time this comes out, she'll probably be 7 at that point. And, just being, she's a quarter Asian. And so she looks a little bit more like her dad than she looks like me. And she already notices that she doesn't look like some of the Disney princesses. And, and she's not experiencing she's not experiencing any racial bias in the healthcare system or by really any means. She's growing up very, very privileged. And I want her to know that. And I really want them to grow up in this world that is not only is the world diverse, but that diversity is experienced and encouraged, and that that the rights of everyone are encouraged as well, just like you're saying. And so I appreciate your take on that. And I appreciate the, challenging me in, I try to diversify my friend group as much as possible. It's really cool about where I live, and not everyone is like this at all. I live very close to a military base. And so I have a new set of friends like every 2 to 4 years, which is so fun. I'm a part of a couple moms groups. And so it is really fun to be able to meet different women and, who have lived in different places, who are diverse in many different ways. But I know that's not true for everyone. So we do have to seek that out. And also in the space, whether we are in the intuitive eating space ourselves, in the health at every size space ourselves, or just kind of those, the people who are interested in it, who are listening to this podcast, whether we're professionals or they're interested in it, supporting all types of women and realizing that there is more out there than just that thin white woman who is, I think, oftentimes the face of intuitive eating and even the face of health at every size, which is sad and which is hard. And so I appreciate everything that you share in that. And I'm sorry for rambling on, because I think I'm thinking all of this through as we're talking, because I think, you're just giving me more inspiration for ways that I need to improve myself and ways I hope that we can encourage other women too. And I know that you're making other women think too, as they're listening to this as well. So what I want to talk about, and something that, was brought to my attention in the last couple of months. And when I really thought about it, I was like, you know what, this is absolutely something. And I think this is a bias that I held to be perfectly honest. And when it comes to eating disorders and disordered eating, I think there's a notion in a lot of ways that Black women simply don't struggle with eating disorders or with body image. Can you speak on that a little bit? I know.
Lies.
Such a lie.
Internet. Yeah, it is. That I think is like my driving force a lot of times for the things that I do, because I've had my own really jacked up relationship with food, and I've watched other people that I know and love have really just crappy relationships with food. And because I work with eating disorders, half of my practice is eating disorders. I've had previous experience working in an eating disorder treatment facility, and I felt like a sore thumb being the only obvious person of color in that situation, even though there were other people of color. They just passed for white, so nobody questioned it, right? But I'm the very obvious, like, you can't miss the fact that I'm Black. And so being in that environment and watching these clients come in and leave, and watching them for the first time, or maybe, for like, not sometimes, for some of them it wasn't the first time, but for some of them it was genuinely the first time that they had been in a higher level of care and felt like someone could relate to their experience. Even if I can't relate to their eating disorder experience, I can relate to their lived experience. And for them, that was this very grounding piece. And so when I think about the literature around eating disorders, is almost like it's 2020 and we finally just got a book on treating Black women with eating disorders.
Wow.
Thank goodness it was written by Black women, or Black people, but still, like, it's 2020. We have how many books on treating eating disorders? And we just got the first one about Black women. And if you look at treatment facilities around the country, right, whether you're looking at the treatment team, the team's all white, or maybe the secretary's Black, or maybe the nurse is Black, but not the therapist and definitely not the dietitian. If I'm seeking care for my eating disorder and I come to your treatment facility and you can't even help me reintegrate the food that I would normally eat with my family, you're not helping me to the best of your ability. Or maybe you are helping me to the best of your ability, but not to the point that I need. And that, for me, is the reason why I keep doing what I do, because I want to make sure that by the time I retire, we don't have to try to figure out how to incorporate these foods that are part of people's culture, because we all can just figure it out. We can all figure out, like, this is how you incorporate this. This is how you can sit at this table with your family and pick these things up and put them on your plate, and they're a part of your meal plan, and you'll be just fine. Your culture is not wrong for choosing these foods. You will be just fine. Like, this is a beautiful expression of your culture.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think, I remember just thinking back to my own nutrition education, which was quite a long time ago now. We're looking back 12 years, and we were really only taught about the foods that were locally kind of available to us. We weren't taught about other cultures. And I didn't start learning about food from different cultures until I went to culinary school and actively sought it out. And you know what? It wasn't even my actual culinary school training that taught me that. We had a day in school where we were supposed to bring in food from our family's culture. And I can't even remember what I brought in. There was a Pakistani man who brought in this incredible spread of food. Like, it was enough to feed like 30 people. And I think there were like 10 or 12 of us. I went to a really small private culinary school up in Toronto. And there was a gentleman who was from Tobago, from the island of Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago. And he brought some, oh my gosh, I had never tasted food like that or spices like that before. And it was just so incredible. And there was, 4 or 5 other people who brought in these different foods that I had never tried before. And actually really living in Toronto, living in a larger city, growing up in a small town in the Northeast, was the first time I experienced so much diversity in food. I had never tried Ethiopian food before. I had never tried Persian food before. I had never tried Korean food before, but I had to actively seek that out. And I think, if I was, someone who was a dietitian or someone in the health space, I wouldn't have known about those types of foods if I hadn't actually experienced that and actually sought that out myself. I wouldn't have known the ingredients in the food or what the foods might taste like or the different flavor profiles, or being able to suggest those things when you're talking about satisfying foods, or creating a balanced plate if you're someone who had an eating disorder and needs that. So I can very much see, just bringing in my own personal perspective, not having that diversity in your life or having that knowledge would make it so difficult to work with people who come from different cultures like that. So I think it really is on the practitioners, if they weren't taught that within their education, but also it's a failing of the education system too, for really not really representing.
Yeah, it's a failure on the education system to make diversity an elective. Right? Because diversity is not an elective. My Blackness is not an elective. It's not like I just get to choose okay, today I'm going to be Black. No, I'm Black every day. Yes. And so making cultural competence an elective and not baked into the entire degree as we go through, so that no matter what you're learning culturally competent, culturally humble medical nutrition therapy, you're learning culturally competent food science, right? I really recently, as a part of, COVID-19 and sheltering in place, I've been you know what? I can't travel right now. So I'm going to bring the world to me. So my new thing has been trying all these different cuisines from around the world. But that's me making the active choice there. Yeah. And that's fine. But what if I had been able to learn about that in school? what if we had that baked all the way through? So like, it's not, a new thing to me to try Jamaican food. It's just like, I'm getting Jamaican food because I like Jamaican food. Like, I just want some whatever it is that I'm choosing. It makes me sad, but also hopeful that we are able to shift academia so that academia actually represents the people and not the people trying to represent academia.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Oh, I love that. And I think that, yeah, the more voices that we have and the more we have people standing up and saying, we need to learn more about this because there is a more diverse group of people who are experiencing these issues, or just in general, even when we're not talking about eating disorders, who need help with their nutrition and knowing what it looks like to find a balance for them and their family, whatever their situation is. If we don't know what to tell them, then we're not going to give them the right advice. And so I think that it is so huge that we actively stand up for this diversity in every area, including food, which isn't something that I would have thought of, until, you're sharing that even just from the food side of things, that we wouldn't really know. And so I appreciate that so much. So I'm just sort of thinking and kind of pondering what else I really want to dig in with you a little bit. Because there's so much more, so much more that we could talk about when it comes to this. So I'm wondering if you have any last words of, and we're not quite at the end yet, but any words of encouragement that you want to share with my listeners who might be new to hearing this and who might be realizing now that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that there was such a lack in the diversity when it comes to healthcare, in the diversity when it comes to the nutrition world, or, the fact that, hey, maybe they are realizing that when they look at a hashtag intuitive eating on Instagram, it is 99% white women representing intuitive eating, myself included, right? So do you have words of encouragement or maybe some action steps for the woman listening who is like, okay, I've got to start making some changes?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing I'm going to tell people is to give yourself some grace, right? It's a learning process. It's not somewhere we arrive. So we got to give ourselves grace for the fact that we're never going to arrive to that place. And then I always suggest following people from a completely different walk of life than you and learning about their lived experience. So whether that's following people of color, that's following disabled people, that's following people with a different gender identity, like something that their marginalizations, their identities don't align with your own, so that you can learn about their lived experience and love your neighbor, right? Like, I'm all for loving my neighbor, and I don't get to decide who's my neighbor, right? Like, I don't get to decide who's my neighbor. The whole world is my neighbor if I can touch them, right? And if we're on the internet, that makes the whole world your neighbor. You can touch them through the internet. And so it's being gentle with yourself and being graceful with yourself, and then really just sitting and learning, and then trying it out, and then figuring out, okay, this worked or maybe that didn't, and being teachable, being correctable of like, okay, because we're not all going to get it right. Like, I've done things and I'm like, ooh, maybe that wasn't quite the right thing to say, or I think I maybe would have, done something differently here. But knowing, again, I'm not going to arrive somewhere. It's just that constant learning and that constant growing, and knowing that even if you never, let's say you never have, 20 or 30,000 followers on Instagram, that doesn't mean that you can't change people's perspective. It's called your sphere of influence. And so your sphere of influence is not the internet, unless you actually have a large following of people. Your sphere of influence are the people that you live your life with every day. That's your family members. That's your kids. That's your the people that you go to work with, the people that you're in class with. That's your actual sphere of influence. And just by you radically accepting yourself and then advocating for other people, even if it's just you saying like, so I'm learning a lot about disability advocacy right now. So it's me saying like, where's the elevator, right? I didn't do anything, quote, profound, but me just saying, where's the elevator? Like, that lets that person in that disabled body that needs a mobility aid or needs assistance getting from one floor to the other, that lets them know that they matter, that you can see them and you can see that they move through the world differently.
Yes. I'm glad that you mentioned that sphere of influence too, being right, starting in our families too, because I know that the majority of the women listening, or the majority of the people listening, are women, and the majority of the women listening are moms. And that's where you start, right? You start with your kids, and you start by being that example for your kids, and then teaching your kids, and then moving on from there. And I think my parents are both wonderful humans, and I love them so much. And, I've talked to my mom a lot about, kind of my own relationship with food and my body, and kind of working through all of that. And I don't think my parents did anything necessarily to, I don't know, to make me think in a certain way or not, in terms of diversity. It wasn't really talked about. It wasn't like there was no judgment or anything like that of other people. In fact, we were, as far as as I'm concerned, we're accepting of all people, but there was no, but you can also take action for them. And you can also diversify your friend group. You can diversify what you look at online, the books that you read. And, so I think we just starting right where we are and not feeling like we need to do it all at once or influence this large group of people. We can start right where we are. So, oh my gosh, so good. We've talked about so much. Oh my goodness. We've talked about haze and intuitive eating and privilege and bias. And I'm wondering if you have some really good resources. I know you mentioned the Fearing the Black Body book, which is one that I know I need to pick up and I know I need to read. Now that I'm finished the last couple of books I was reading, I know that's going to be on my list as well. Do you have any other good resources when it comes to health at every size, when it comes to bias in the healthcare industry, that you want to recommend?
For health at every size, I always recommend the book Health at Every Size by Linda Bacon. Lindo Bacon, formerly Linda Bacon. I think that's a great start. And then as far as, there's a book that I like off the top of my head can't think of, but I can send it to you. That is about racism in healthcare. And that one was like, it's on my list to read, but from what I've gathered so far, it's quite mind blowing. And I have a bunch of I'm a really nerdy nerd, and I'm very comfortable and content with my nerdy nerdness. I'm like, if you need research articles, I've got plenty. That's what I spend my time reading, is research articles. But yeah, that definitely, those two books are the top ones that I always recommend for that. Let me look at my bookshelf. I think The Body Is Not an Apology is also a great one about body image and our ability to kind of take ourselves out of our own body image and be very respectful towards ourselves. Oh, and Hood Feminism. That's the other one that I'm reading that I think is going to be a great one.
Oh, I have not heard of that one.
Yes, that one is feminism, but from a more inclusive and more inclusive standpoint. So it's her looking at the ways that mainstream feminism has left out more marginalized people, and how you include them in your feminism. That way we can advocate for all people and not just some of the people.
That's so good. Oh, thank you for those. I am definitely I'm going to put all of those in the show notes, and I'll have them come to you if they want more research studies, because I'm all about the research too. When I did the intuitive eating counselor training, I was so excited to see how many research studies there were. And they were like, all right, let's dig in. I'm going to grab my highlighter and learn so much that I hadn't learned before. So I know there's definitely people who are going to resonate more with the research, and some people are going to resonate more, with books. But I think just hearing this and being willing to listen this far to this episode is a great first step in learning more about diversity in so many different areas, especially when it comes to eating and intuitive eating and healthcare. So I appreciate your time so much and everything that you've shared.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah. So can you just share where my listeners can best connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on the internet. I am on Instagram at Encouraging Dietitian, spell it all the way out. And then I'm also on Twitter. That's my snarkier side, my more sassy 240 characters or less side. And that's at Encouraging RD. And then I also have my own podcast, Intuitive Eating for the Culture.
Yes. And your podcast is so great. The episodes most of them are short and sweet and really powerful. So they are awesome. I've listened to quite a few of them. So I have 3 final rapid fire questions that I love to ask because I love to celebrate food and eating in a way that is fun and joyful. So my first question is, what is your favorite thing to cook?
Currently, potatoes.
What is your favorite way to cook potatoes? I'm curious.
A baked potato has really been my jam now for the past like month. And then I just bought a cast iron skillet, so I'm trying to get my like southernness on, if you will. And so I've been like making a lot of like scrambles with like where I'll like saute the potatoes, add some like peppers, some onions, some kale, some eggs. It's a good time.
That sounds really good. I love my cast iron skillet. It's so good. Makes everything crispy and delicious. So what is your favorite thing to order or eat if you happen to be going out to a restaurant? I mean, I guess if we're allowed these days.
Right. I think my favorite thing to order usually is fries or, it's probably fries. I think if I'm ordering anything, I joked that I was going to have a French fry bar at my wedding. If I were to invite people to my wedding, it would be a French fry bar.
I love that. That sounds like such a fun idea. I would totally come for a French fry bar.
Make your own sauce.
Ooh, I like that. I'm already married, so I guess I can't switch up my wedding plans, but I like that. My husband would love that too. Oh, it's so fun. So my last question, because we are the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast, and I really love sharing about, like I said, food in a way that is joyful, but also balanced. So food and life balance in every area. What does your beautiful balance mean to you?
To me, that is nourishing myself in a way that's compassionate towards myself to allow me to be compassionate towards others.
Oh my goodness, so good. What a perfect place to end. Thank you, Christina, again, so much for being on. This was a fantastic conversation. I probably could have talked to you for hours more. And I think I say that with every single guest because I truly could. I think I'm very appreciative of all the guests that I have on because for the most part, I handpick my guests because I love what they're doing in the world. So I very much appreciate everything you're doing in the world and spending time with me today.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. If you loved it, would you take a screenshot and share it with a friend over on Instagram and tag me in it? It helps me so much to know what you love and are taking away from each episode. If you really loved it, would you hop over to iTunes and give me a star rating and review? Every rating and review helps this podcast be seen and heard by more women who need to hear the message of balance and wellness without deprivation. It's the best free gift you could give me. And as a reminder, the information and opinions on this podcast are meant for education and inspiration only and are not to be taken as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please consult with a trusted practitioner before making any changes. Have a beautiful day, friend, and I'll see you in the next episode.